The world needs American leadership and not American arrogance. Close quote. I did not say that. These are words from JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon speaking at the Dealbook Summit in New York last week, being interviewed by Andrew Ross. If you do not know who Jamie Dimon is or how powerful he is, think of Elon Musk and uh, Bill Gates, and those are small fries. Jamie Dimon is a big gun. His thoughts are very important. Specifically, what touched me in his speech is about what he said concerning African countries and third world countries generally. He does recognize that the United States has taken a step back in the developmental issues of these small countries, and that has given a leeway to China to overtake America in global politics in these so-called third world countries or frontier markets. What is important uh, for me there is that such a thought leader as Jamie Dimon is very critical in assessing how the American worldview point is like at the moment concerning our nation. He might not be a politician, but is the most toughest and most strategically positioned Wall Street banker, uh, and therefore powerful in the influence of American geopolitics. We hang to his every word very seriously. And he is the guy that we need to walk alongside in aiding poor, weak, dissatisfied countries like Zimbabwe, whose leadership, who has taken this look east policy, this Chinese influence on our nation that has not really materialized in improved living conditions of our people. I do not want to blame the Chinese for it. Don't get me wrong. It is our government that fails to rebuild our country. It's not China. China just doesn't police the governments that it deals with. The United States, however, does police. But because perhaps of the backlash the United States has faced over the years, it has taken a step back in that kind of policy, and it has led to a massive uh, suffering in the third world. And I think Jamie Dimon's point drives on that issue and he hits the nail on the head when he speaks about America's need to develop or to sponsor or to invest more on developmental finance on the countries or nations that have been neglected. And he also believes that America must negotiate from a position of strength, of military strength, and not military weakness. To me, it begins to show me that it becomes more essential for us to take advantage of the needs of the current superpower. The superpower is facing a global competition from China, and China is making great inroads through its Belt and Road Initiative. By the way, we as Zimbabweans, our responsibility is not to maintain US superiority or to help Chinese overtake the Americans. There is a direct competition between the Americans and the Chinese, and it has got nothing to do with us and should not have anything to do with us, except that we come in to see how that relationship could benefit our people, especially in terms of taking our people out of poverty. For at the core of our political campaign is getting Zimbabweans out of poverty, lifting the 20 million Zimbabweans out of poverty and entering into a government of which is a developmental state with full rights of self-determination and the rights to development without being hindered by the geopolitical concerns of the dueling forces of the East and the West. Therefore, our geopolitical positioning as a small country like Zimbabwe needs to be cognizant of this dual war between China and USA, and and should help us to rightfully position ourselves in such a way that we are not seen as an impediment to either of the two's trajectory for victory. But we want to ride the waves of whoever is willing to uplift us from our misery. I say our misery, us as the suffering majority of Zimbabweans who are under the yoke of an oppressive regime led by Emerson Mnangagwa and ZANU-PF, a military state whose military gentlemen have forgotten their uh, their mandate of serving the interests of the public. Therefore, it brings in the US military in the picture as a global superpower in the global police of all militaries around the world. How do they view Chinese military's influence on the Zimbabwean military? How do they view the the way in which the Zimbabwean military and the ZANU-PF regime is allowed to undermine human rights and carry out some deplorable actions against its citizens, including the death of political activists and the fear mongering and the perpetual assault on civil rights and liberties in the nation. Given tensions in the Middle East right now and our president's association with Iran, one would see that it is an opportunity for the US policymakers to explore in its defense systems for the fight of the survival of Israel. And us as Zimbabweans in the opposition, we need to bring to light and take into account the needs of the superpower and the needs of Israel as far as the Zimbabwe and Iran situation is uh, uh, is uh, 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 is concerned. The real concern there is the use of our minerals and how safe it is in the hands of an autocratic regime that have got no regard whatsoever for human rights and its closer ties with Tehran. I know that most Zimbabwean citizens do not read into these things and therefore do not bother. Hence, it's very difficult for a lot of people to understand this channel because we delve deeper into issues that otherwise people do not deal with on an everyday basis. But I need you to understand that it is these issues that I deal with on this channel that will be the key differentiator in 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 determining if our country will truly be liberated and gotten out of poverty or will forever stay in the abyss. Forever looking for events surrounding Triple C and ZANU-PF's daily fights, to me, is not a waste of time, but you need to realize that that is an orchestrated political gimmick, a deep betrayal of the Zimbabwean population by both the Triple C and ZANU-PF into keeping people focused on story after story, week in and week out, without any real progress whatsoever. For the political model in Harare is not about to bring change, but rather is to preach about a change which they know very well will never come. And the political streets in Harare are very much filled with politicians, both in ZANU-PF and more specifically in the opposition, who have got no intention of changing the country, but they've got an intention of filling the role which they have to play, the role of pretend opposition. Now, but the global elites do not have a concern of, or do not have much of a concern of the suffering of Zimbabweans. Their concerns are much deeper than that. Their concerns about the survival of Israel, not about the survival of Zimbabweans. True, the United States, in its truest form as a competitive country, has got the right to be competitive even against China, and also to be competitive against countries like Zimbabwe. However, after listening to Vice President Kamala Harris, also at the same summit, the Deal Book Summit, also being interviewed by Andrew Rosoken, she emphasizes the need for the United States to be empathetic to the needs of poor people. And she was saying this whilst addressing issues concerning immigration laws in the United States. And we read from that an, an interest or an enthusiasm to participate in, in tackling the problems from the root causes. We therefore read that the White House has got an understanding that some of the problems that they face in the United States, like immigration problems, which also is a big problem in the United Kingdom and Europe, some of the solutions may include, but not limited to, dealing with the nation states where the people come from. In particular, the Zimbabwe situation has got to do with dealing with the self-imposed president Emerson Mnangagwa and his rogue regime, whose interest is to run the country down, and that has led to a massive migration of Zimbabweans from the country to neighboring countries, to Europe, to the Americas, and therefore adding to the already painful problem of immigration uh, in the United States and in Europe. So you see how I think about these things, and getting into the shoes of our counterparts in Washington and beyond, to see how we can align ourselves with their foreign policy and domestic policy objectives in such a way that Zimbabwe can benefit from it, instead of screaming to the people of the world and demanding that they be concerned about our concern when they themselves have got a mountain of their own problems that they need to sort out. Therefore, going forward, we need to identify these hotspots or these soft spots in or gaps in American foreign policy needs that Zimbabwe could participate in building a conducive environment both for the global leaders and also for our people that have been exposed to a sustained period of poverty and a lost generation, of which I belong to one. A generation that has lost its livelihoods due to the inefficiencies and the decay and rot of the politics in Harare.